The title of my talk may have surprised some of you a little, because here am I as a old university professor brought up in old traditions in England, where the university never crossed the boundary into politics and other messy things. And the fact that I did on numerous occasions, hand in hand with my, can I call him my half-brother, Professor Bruno Messley, crossed this boundary and occasionally got ourselves into some trouble for doing so, is really part of the essence of what I want to put before you this morning. This was the Darjeeling vicinity in 1968. Shortly before we were due to arrive for our special conference in Darjeeling, a group of about 20 of us, there had occurred a catastrophic rainfall that produced rainfall somewhere between 80 and 100 centimeters in 3 days. That released landslides, as you can see. I described the Darjeeling hills as having chicken pox. To begin to count the number of landslides, I gave up and said, well, 20,000. The next one show what happens when the runoff hits the plains or the terrain. We were told that somewhere in the middle distance here had existed a rich agricultural village. We were impressed with the magnitude of the destruction. I was tempted to go to talk to the senior climatologist, and he assured me that events of this kind had occurred in the past, and the story that we were being given, that all of the damage was due to deforestation, should be considered rather carefully. With such a downfall of rain at the end of the monsoon season, when the ground was already saturated, whether there was forest there or not, would there not been a colossal amount of damage? And I went away from Darjeeling, but I had that notion in my mind that the standard simple explanation that we were being given was perhaps not the full story. When we came to look around, with help of such people in the room here as Pradeep Mool, to look for field areas for intensive study for developing a series of mountain hazard maps, we began to see this kind of landscape. And the critical thoughts that were implanted in my mind in Darjeeling 10 years previously began to creep back. Now, how can you ever call the people who manufactured that landscape ignorant farmers, ignorant peasants? This was our chosen field area, the Trisuli Road cutting through it, the high Himalaya in the background, and the slope that leads up to Karkani. Virtually while I was taking that photograph, I had in my mind an admonition written in a country report by the Asian Development Bank that the rain-fed terraces were an indication of the lack of understanding of the local farmers, and if they had any wit at all, they would make sure the terraces sloped back into the hillside. Now, this was an outrageous remark, because as I think that if such a process had developed, this would accelerate the danger of landsliding. This picture is from 1979, and when I saw this, I thought, well, perhaps I'm wrong. Possibly, as everyone was speculating, this kind of landslide will enlarge and devour the whole hillside. So I took this picture and I thought this can be a photo benchmark. And the next photograph taken, it's hard to see. The landslide was here. Much later on, I gathered from a local farmer, the actual production of that area was equal to the land on either side, if not slightly greater. In other words, these people know how landslides are formed, and they know what to do about it within the limits of available labour. Now quote the World Bank, Country Report 1970. At the present rate of forest loss, there will be no accessible forest in Nepal by the year 2000. This kind of preposterous reporting causes an enormous amount of damage. If nothing else, It results in the incorrect use of large amounts of bilateral and UN aid money. In the Pamirs, in 1911, a massive landslide occurred and dropped something like 3 cubic kilometers of rock into the Bartang Gorge. By 1999, the lake was 60 kilometers long and up to 500 meters deep. The Tajik government had requested the US Army Corps of Engineers to do a worst-case modelling that if the dam were to break and all the water were to drain out, what would happen? And the net result was desperate destruction for 2,000 kilometers, down 120 kilometers of the Bartang Gorge, wiping out 33 villages, but then down the Amud Daria River and all the way into the Aral Sea. Churn up all that toxic stuff and throw that into the air. And in the process, there were 5 million lives at risk. A group of about 12 of us with Tajik counterparts and Tajik army, as you will see, and a nice helicopter. We are sitting on the edge of Lake Sarez. We undertook a lot of work. Now, we went back to Geneva and we held a press conference, and we went to great trouble to explain the basis for saying the threat of catastrophe was minimal. We recommended early warning system, and obviously one has to keep an eye on this colossal body of water, but the likelihood of a serious breakout was minimal. And all of those newspaper reporters, I'm proud to say, took our story. 2 days before, the New Scientist published an article, 5 million people at risk, flood of biblical proportions can happen any minute. There is still serious geophysical investigations going on, and the World Bank is still concerned about this lake. In December, in the middle of the Copenhagen Science magazine, I was shocked to see that they published an article with the title "Peril in the Pamirs," coming back to the same prospect of massive outbreak of this lake. You know, okay, now there's another statement, or NGO groups, World Wildlife Fund. The Khumbu Glacier has retreated 5 kilometers since Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay climbed Everest. That photograph was taken in 1956, I'm pretty sure by Fritz Müller. The next one was taken by Alton Byers in 2007. It's not easy to make a direct comparison, but certainly you can see there's been no retreat of 5 kilometers in the period. Now, we're not saying that Himalayan glaciers are not thinning and retreating and lakes are forming, we know that. But to say that the Khumbu Glacier retreated 5 kilometers is a piece of arrant nonsense. This is again back into the Pamirs, and I think you can see what looks fairly insignificant. An earthquake occurred, I think it was in the 1947, I may be wrong, but a big chunk of this mountain fell off. The next one shows that in a matter of minutes it ran down the valley, and somewhere about here was the town of Kate, the administrative centre with a population of about 22,000 people that was totally wiped out. We do know that catastrophic events occur, very high magnitude, very low frequency, and we are facing the problem with the gloss also of how to determine degree of danger. I think I should stop there. Thank you very much.